A show based on the facts, honesty, the man, the myth, the legend. ChristiTutionalist Joseph M. Leonard.
Welcome to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP, in association with thelibertybeacon.com. And I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's L-E-N-A-R-D. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and an occasional guest type podcast. I really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show.
Today's episode, who is babysitting whom? Okay, it's not really about, and full disclosure, I indeed was married for a while, but my wife and I didn't have children. We had certainly planned to at some point, but a few years into our marriage, probably heard me say I'm on disability. I became sick and landed up then being divorced. So we never had kids because we just hadn't got to that point. I got sick before we got to that point where we had children. And so this isn't really about the need to, like parents needing to get away and having a night out for themselves and hiring the kid next door or grandma and grandpa babysitting the kid. And is the kid really babysitting grandma and grandpa instead? No, that's not what I mean here. But again, I felt full disclosure, I never had children. So I'm coming at this from a perspective, obviously, of not having children. This is more political statement. Who do children belong to? Parental rights. Do the children belong to you? Or, as we've discussed at other times, how the left wants your children to be wards of the state, and therefore this is about education. And again, not being a parent, it's hard. Some would say definitely not my place to criticize others that some parents clearly just want their kids to go to school to be babysat and giving them breaks during the day. I don't want to be judgmental on that of them for that. I get it, even though without having kids, I know how can I truly, honestly say one way or the other what it's like. I can't. I don't know. I never went through that. But the important thing here is that given the Wuhan hysteria, a lot of parents have awakened to the point and the fact that what is going on in our schools and that their lack of paying attention, lack of involvement in when their children are being watched, right? We expect them to be educated, not indoctrinated due to the Wuhan hysteria, the leftist indoctrination factories, the leftist creation of the Department of Education to top down control the education system and what is put into our kids' head, what to think rather than how to think, to indoctrinate rather than educate has been exposed. But let me back up a second. I forgot I was going to say this about not being a parent. One could say that, since my divorce in 2006, I've been a cat dad, a cat guy. Well, why am I saying that? Because, of course, all of a sudden, J.D. Vance's comment about cat ladies is an issue. It's a problem. And again, not being a parent, I understand where he was coming from. He is not trying to denigrate all people who have never had children, but of course, it was never a problem, what he said, until now he's a vice presidential candidate for the Republican ticket. And he's not denigrating all single cat ladies. He's talking about the importance or the value of having a family and having children. As I said, I'm divorced. I am certainly very grateful for the time that I was married. And again, I got sick. There was a period of time, a few years, that my health was so bad that I literally have major gap in my memory, chunks, several years of time that were such a fog, such a blur. I was so out of it. Years of time are like void in my head. And I thank God that I had someone there to help me through that period. It ultimately destroyed my marriage. I became someone else. I was void. I was like an empty vessel wandering through time for a few years. I wasn't myself. It landed up in a divorce. But again, the point here I'm saying is that at least thankfully I had that time with her. I am grateful for it. I am grateful to her. Still very much love my wife. Couldn't be with my wife at this point in time anymore. But it's about more than self, what J.D. Vance was talking about. It is his Christian faith and value in family, which, yes, majority of the time means having children to indeed complete that man and woman, blah, 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 bride and groom. Oh, there's the term I was looking for. I apologize, had a minor brain hiccup there. Yeah, the bride and groom, then indeed having a child or children to kind of complete the family. But again, I understand and know that's not for everybody. That's not the problem here. That is not what J.D. Vance was talking about. It's about selflessness. It's about humanity, us as humans, part of our nature, part of what was put in us in our creation, to not be a lone wandering not selfless, that's what I'm talking about here, our need. It's about selflessness. It's not about being selfish. That is what JD was referring to. Not all single cat ladies. It is the purpose, the intent, or the context of the situation. Why? If they just didn't happen to find the right person to be with, that's not what he was saying, that somehow they must be mentally deficient or somehow lacking of any substance. Their life is worthless. It is not what he said, not what he meant for sure. It's about those who indeed are selfish, that are alone, purposefully choosing to be alone because everything and only is ever about themselves and their convenience. They didn't find someone that was perfect match. We all talk about and hope for a soulmate, and in this world, perhaps our soulmate is really 10 states over. What's the chance of really meeting that soulmate? But having a partner in life and being selfless and having someone to work with and be with and cooperate with. Again, I know I'm kind of rambling here because, as I've said before, I don't script this show. And this thought is still rather loose in my head. But I hope you understand what I'm saying. I certainly don't think my life is worthless and meaningless. I don't think for a minute, again, a cat guy instead of a cat lady, that J.D. Vance would say, my life is worthless, meaningless, and pointless because I didn't have children. But that's kind of a rabbit hole that wasn't or isn't the point of this show. The point of this show is indeed who is babysitting whom when you send your children to school. A lot of people, in terms of that, kind of see it like, "Ooh, that's a nice break." Mom and dad may need to both work, especially in this modern day and age. So someone can't be home for the child, or if someone is home, and I'm not saying it's got to be the mother, right? Remember the Keaton movie, Mr. Mom? There is nothing wrong with the male being the home dad if the wife has the better job and working, if and where possible, if one of the parents can be home to take care of the home and raise the children, that is a good thing. I'm not demanding, expecting, insisting it has to be the woman, but we all know as Christians, yes, there is a difference in men and women, and in general, heads are going to explode if the liberals tuned in, right? The woman is generally the more nurturing of the genders, of the sexes. We were made different. There's a point and purpose to that. But regardless of which parent is home, if one can be, to help ensure the children are raised with some values and principles, is part of this question, this overall concept that both parents might have to be working, and school is seen as a break, a babysitter. Otherwise, it would have to have a daycare, which is expensive, and that raises a whole other issue of economics. Are you really working just to pay the daycare center? Then what's the point? Why doesn't one of you stay home? But then again, another rabbit hole. The whole point is the Wuhan hysteria days woke up a lot of parents as they were home from work too, a lot of them, and looked at the Zooms and saw the new core R's, as I call them: radicalism, raunch, perversion, porn, and racism through CRT. You don't eliminate racism by constantly peddling more racism, like affirmative action that has been struck down by the courts over and over, but yet they keep reworking it because they like segregation, they like separation, they like division. I'm talking about the left here. They want the identity politics, but you don't have equality of opportunity when providing special rights for anyone based on anything, sex or skin tone or whatever. Special rights are not equal rights or equal opportunity as outlined and guaranteed by our Constitution. And of course, our nation was never perfect to begin with. Yes, obviously, there was a lot of discrimination there. And racism is the wrong word. You've heard me say it before. We are but one human race. We are subclasses and subcultures. So it isn't racism, it's culturalism. And you even have subcultures within different classes of skin tone. Tyrus talked about this on Gutfeld the other day, right? Like, because Kamala was pulling a Hitlery, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, she's talking to a group, and a Southern accent comes out. It's like, and Tyrus is talking about, we don't all talk like that. That isn't all Black people, but this is the leftist stereotype, right? And the pandering, the identity politics, the division. All of a sudden, Kamala, who's Jamaican and Indian, some trying to claim her as African American, all of a sudden, pure identity politics and pandering, talking like Hitler did back when, with a sudden third draw, which again is a cultural thing. It's not a black or white thing, but to Tyrus's point.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Ed Bondarenka, and I host Your American Heritage on Saturdays at 2 in the afternoon on this station. Your American Heritage is a show about the struggle we find ourselves in and how to react to it in the light of our biblical and American heritage. Listen to it while you're working around the house, the garage, cleaning the guns, walking the dog, driving, or just lazing around. Join me at 2 o'clock Saturdays here on Wham Radio, 1600 AM, 92.7 FM.
God bless America.
Kamala trying to sound more Black, even though she actually was raised in Canada, being of Jamaican and Indian descent, and then being here in the U.S. and in California, raised and grew up in elitist neighborhoods of California. Again, nothing to do with Black or white. There are rich Black people, there are poor Black people. There are rich white people, there are poor white people. Same Hispanic, Asian, yellow polka-dotted midgets. Whatever the class, the subclass, or the subculture, but the left is the ones engaging in stereotypes. I coined on July the 21st, you could call me Joe Stradamus. I coined the hashtag Camelot because the left is all about style over substance, personalities rather than principles. You hear me talk all the time. Principles, not personalities. Well, the left is just the opposite. So I coined the hashtag Camelot. I knew it was coming. I saw the makeover of her ignoring her time as prosecutor in California and her soft on crime stance, except for her locking away a whole lot of black males on minor pot offenses, and she was proud of that, joking about the fact that she smoked pot herself. But other than that, she was soft on crime. But now we've got these commercials. Oh my God, she was the tough prosecutor. No, she wasn't. Trump is the felon. It's the prosecutor versus the felon. But the point here being the makeover, identity politics makeover. All of a sudden, she's black. You got to vote for her because she's black. Ignore the substance of her policy and what she's been about her whole life. Oh my goodness. Kamala. They're JFK-esking her makeover, right? Like she is the modern day equivalent of the JFK Camelot. Oh, the style, the grace, which has zero to do with substance and value to your life, she would bring. She brings more fascistic, dictatorial, tyrannical, federalized, everything top-down policy. She claims she's changed her position because, again, part of the Kamala makeover. But again, I said it on the 28th, and I was joking, call me Joe Stradamus, because, wow, lo and behold, New York Magazine had Kamala on their cover on the 28th of July. Whoa, now I'm not suggesting they stole it. Obviously, some people can think of the same concept being miles apart, but it wouldn't put it past me that they didn't take it from my social media pages. I'm on 15 different platforms and peddled it heavily from July 21st to July 24th. But the whole makeover, the whole trying to talk about, oh, her style, not her substance, her personality, not her principles, which are, though she's flip-flopped, like the old John Kerry ad. Remember the John Kerry ad where they showed him sailing about, he was for it before he was against it, and then he was for it. Well, Kamala, also I call hashtag Kamala, Kamele, because it will be an extinction level event if she ever becomes president. All of a sudden, she's not for eliminating all private health care and having a full federalized, socialized medicine. You won't have a private health insurance that has to approve you. No, with a fully government controlled run system, you have a deep state bureaucrat deciding whether you get this or that. It's who has the power and control. Just like when the Nazis implemented it in the 30s, it wasn't about health, it's about power and control over people. And the left wanting federal power and control over all people, eliminating private health care. But of course, it's part of the makeover. Oh, she's a moderate. She's not for that anymore. Oh, she's not for gun confiscation anymore, even though she said she would have a mandated supposed assault rifle, which AR-15 stands for Armalite Rifle, not assault rifle. It's just a type of rifle. It's not a submachine gun. But all of a sudden, she's not for that. And not for this, even though she was for it. And likely, if elected, she'll be for it again. But yet again, I apologize. I am now like 25 minutes in, and I haven't really gone into the point and substance of who is babysitting whom. But this makes the point that one issue does not exist in a vacuum. They all relate to other issues. And Kamala represents the leftist mindthink of your children really belong to the state, the statists. It's about statism. It's about federal, dictatorial, tyrannical, top-down control. It's why they created the Department of Education during Carter. And of course, it's unconstitutional. There is no federal authority for that. That is a states' rights issue, and even more so, a local issue, your school board, and your unfortunate, in many cases, lack of involvement in it. We need to be more involved. And back to Wuhan, more parents have woken up to what's going on in the indoctrination factories, and indeed why the DOJ is targeting these parents as, oh my goodness, domestic terrorists, because they dare question now what is being indoctrinated into their children rather than their children being educated. That they push back against the leftist deep state makes them domestic terrorists, which is in line with who is babysitting whom, because again, the left, including some CINOs and rhinos, along with all on the left that comprise the deep state, think your children just happen to have come from you, but ultimately they belong to the state. And when you hand them over to the schools, is their rightful time to miseducate them and indoctrinate them how they want. Hence the title, Who is Babysitting Whom? The adage, the joke, that indeed far too many parents have seen school as just the babysitter rather than the point and purpose of what our school is supposed to be for. But the left sees you, yes, let me look at the clock, 28 minutes in, 29 minutes in, finally get to the point of that title. Who is babysitting whom? The left, Hitlery, in her warping and twisting of the biblical notion, it takes a village, because community is biblical. Community, I hope you've heard me say in another episode, is voluntary. It is about charity, us in our personal Christian commandment to be our brother's keeper and taking care of widows and orphans. But the Bible also says there is a difference and a distinction between those who are unable, who we have a personal commandment to be responsible for, versus the unwilling, which we have zero obligation to. And it is also why Christ said, the poor will always be among you. It isn't about necessarily economic status he was talking about there. He was talking about 2,000 years ago, indeed, human nature, us as a species, humankind. There will always be some among you so unmotivated, so unwilling to bother to want to try to improve themselves and their lot in life, that they want to have communism, which is not biblical, because communism is forced. It is theft and redistribution. But there will be some who will always be so lazy and so unwilling to bother to try to earn themselves a way through life or a better way through life, that are happy to sit around and, as we now say, vote for a living, vote for handouts so they can be comfortable and cushy with a minor roof over their head and a bit of food for their belly, and beyond that, they're happy. So Christ said, the poor will always be among you, and that was more about human nature and less about economics, but it does relate in that sense. So major difference between community, which is biblical, and communism, which is warped and twisted from community from which it is derived. But the left see your kids, again, Hitlery and warping of it takes a village, which is biblical, yes. Who is babysitting whom, right? Indeed, in order to have a parents' night out, you may need the neighbor's kid to babysit. Family, friends, a village, a community, not a communistic commune, a community to help raise the child and ensure they have proper values and principles, a set of positive morals. So yes, it takes a village is biblical, but Hitlery and the left twisted it to mean it takes a fascistic state to raise your child, that your child, your neighbor's children, everybody's children really belong to the left, to the deep state. And if you hadn't realized that point yet, I've been just kind of implying and alluding to a bit now that I've directly stated it 33 minutes in. That's the point of this title in Who is Babysitting Whom. They think you are the night sitter, all right? You happen to get the kids that they think belong to them back temporarily so that you can house them, feed them dinner, put them to bed so they're fresh in the morning to then be indoctrinated by the left. I'm going to wrap it up because, as I said, I'm like 33 minutes in, and I don't like to make the shows overly long, but I want to read from the LibertyBeacon.com piece, also entitled Who is Babysitting Whom. Please look that up because, again, these correlate and correspond. They are in conjunction with each other. This show is not identical to the piece. The piece is not identical to the show. The article was written 2 weeks ago. I'm recording the show today off the top of my head, off the cuff, if you will, even though I've got on a short sleeve shirt. If you see, I'm behind the scenes there. So I guess the cuff is up here. It's not down here by the wrist. I'm going to read just the opening paragraph that sets up and goes into different ways the point. And in practicality, it goes only directly into the point of who is babysitting whom, since I've gone down several rabbit holes here. But again, issues relate to one another. These things all tie together. But what the genesis of this was, get it? It's a Christian show. The genesis of, yeah, but I know. I'm sorry. Lame humor. I had a conversation with someone the other day who brought up a leftist who admitted what we've known, what we all see, what we've been warning about, in that public schools are leftist indoctrination factories, and she, along with her other leftists, dared to express outrage over parents trying to exert parental rights over the children of the fascistic leftist state tools and pawns they're trying to turn into leftist zombies in school. That those last few words aren't in the article I ad-libbed again. And again, the point that the show is not identical to the article is not identical to the show. But yes, I actually, every once in a while, these leftists will say that quiet part out loud. Your children aren't your children. You may have popped them out, but they now belong to the left. They are wards of the state. They want both parents working because then you become slaves to the state and your children indeed wards of the state, and you're just the night sitter. Thank you so much for taking care of the fascist state, Hitler's village, Hitler's communistic state that feels they own your children for them. And now, in conclusion, after all this rambling, I'm sure you do get the point of why this show and the thelibertybeacon.com correlated corresponding in conjunction with article is titled, Who is Babysitting Whom? And I hope, please, yes, not just share this program. The point is, even if you don't share this program, you are now armed intellectually with logic and reason how to talk about this issue of Hitler's warping of It Takes a Village, the warping of who is babysitting whom, who do children actually belong to, the wards of the state, slaves of the state issues that may come up from time to time. I hope that I have now armed you with some additional information, additional food for thought, additional way that you can argue how the left has warped biblical community into leftist, forced, tyrannical communism, which our republic, not mobocracy, was never intended to be. Our republic has been warped from community to leftist communism more and more, and we must roar, as I hashtag ROAR. And no, I like to joke, I'm not talking about Katy Perry fanboyism and her roar video, right? Which was really a cute, clever song paying homage to Helen Reddy's I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. Her roar song is rather clever. So I give her credit for that. But when I say roar, I mean restore our American republic that we are supposed to be, our personal individual freedoms, our personal and individual responsibilities, free markets, not controlled markets, all the things our nation was founded on versus what the left is trying to take us into becoming, as Obama, I call him, Obamao. He's more of a Maoist than he is closer to any of our nation's founders. They are fundamentally transforming America from the greatest, most free, and let me throw in DEI here, diversity, equity, inclusion, another rabbit hole. But again, all these relate. We are the most diverse and inclusive nation on the planet. E pluribus unum, from many one. Yes, most of us are all having legally immigrated from elsewhere and blended in our melting pot to become a unique American culture. It's not cultural appropriation, it's homage that we adopt pieces of each other's culture to be our own unique American culture. It is the most diverse nation on the planet because we've got people here from virtually every other corner of the planet. So when the left says diversity, they don't mean diversity. It is, of course, twisting, warping of the language, which there is a show on, and of course several The Liberty Beacon articles on that I've written. They're also not about inclusion. The left literally is peddling segregation again. Black-only dorms, black-only graduations. That's not inclusion, people. That's exclusionary. That's identity politics. That's division. That's racism. Again, racism, the wrong word. We are, again, but one race. We are subcultures, subclasses. So it is classism or culturalism. But any way you slice it, it is divide and conquer. It is their identity politics manure, a lot of Walensky style, right? I'm going to wrap it up here because, again, I do indeed keep going down other rabbit holes, but you understand, I know you do, and why I beg and plead with you. Despite the fact that I've kind of been rambling in this episode, and yes, I openly, freely admit I kind of rambled in this episode because this show is, as I say, me, you, and an occasional guest, but it's off the cuff, off the top of my head. I start with the subject matter and we go down the various rabbit holes as they open up and deal with because they relate to one another. So please, at least, if not sharing the actual episode, share the concept. Now that you have in your mind the term, who is babysitting whom? Thank you all for tuning in. One last time, let me apologize. I think I've rambled and kind of dove down various other related rabbit holes more so than I usually do. So from the bottom of my heart, I apologize for that. I hope you were able to follow it all as I kind of bounced around a bit, but these things all relate. Please share the concepts, if not the show, as we try to restore our American Republic. ChristiTutionalist politics, Christian-based U.S. constitutionalism that our founders gave us, our Judeo-Christian foundations that the left fundamental transformation is trying to destroy, the most free and prosperous nation on the planet, the nation that is lifted back to the rising tides lift all boats episode, have lifted more people out of poverty, not just in our own nation, but around the entire world than in the history of all mankind prior to now. And the left wants to destroy that, make us all in equity, basically poor. That's how communism always worked. One last thing I am going to throw in here on the community versus communism, the Bradford colony, right? You don't have to learn from Marx, Lenin, Stalin, Che, Mao, Xi, Chavez, Maduro, more recently Chavez and Maduro in Venezuela. Maduro just stole another election, dictator in Venezuela, but a communist state. They were once the most wealthy nation in South America, and now it is the poorest, despite having the most prosperous oil reserves in all of South America, but you don't have to learn the failings of communism from them. Bradford Colony, the Mayflower, they leave out the part, communist, compact, and failing here in America long before Karl Marx came along and espoused. I'm having trouble with my pronunciation today, as well as my thought process. Bradford, the Communist Mayflower Compact, a commonwealth. Everyone shared equally. Everyone was, of course, supposed to put in work equally. But of course, as Jesus said, the poor will always be among you. Not about economics, but human nature. More and more people got lazy and decided, like Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, eventually happened in the Bradford Colony. More and more people decided, hey, I'm getting everything supposedly for free. I'm just going to ride in the cart and let them pull me. Eventually, there's too few people pulling the cart to be able to move the cart because so many lazy people have decided to just climb in the cart. And again, back to the point, biblically, there's a difference between those who were unable being in the cart and needing to be pulled versus those unwilling to help pull the cart and deciding to get in the cart. So the Bradford Colony, they almost all starved to death. Bradford then instituted what America today is based upon: individual rights, not collective rights, individual and personal responsibilities. Biblical Bradford, private property was instituted rather than the collective commonwealth. So people could indeed work harder and benefit more than the others based on the fruits of their labor. There is this thing, again, human nature. We need incentives. We need also disincentives. If you don't work, you don't eat. Again, unless you're unable. That's a difference. That's a distinction. The Bible makes it clear. But the unwilling don't just get to show up and have a roof put over their head at the expense of everyone else, food on their table 3 times a day at the expense of everything else, because there is no such thing as free, and we're not necessarily only talking about monetary economics here. We're talking labor, someone's labor. As Jared Howe says, you have no right to demand and expect something of someone else. Healthcare is not a right. Education is not a right. This, that, the other thing. I forget all what Jared Howe said in his quote, which is indeed in ChristiTutionalist Politics 2, the quotations chapter. Anything that takes the labor, the time and effort of another, or the capital of another is not a human right. We hope to work together as a community to provide these things with each other, but you have no right to enslave another, to force them to provide you food, or force them to provide you housing, force them to provide you health care services, any more than the Confederate, the Demo KKK rats had to enslave Black people to pick cotton. And again, slavery, another rabbit hole. Not all slaves were black. Not all blacks were slaves. There were free blacks in America. There were black slaves in America. Ask the Irish and the Chinese in the early ages that were also indentured servant slaves. So this show indeed goes down all these rabbit holes and is about honesty, reality versus leftist delusional twisting and warping of language and history to try to transform us to communism, because communism is always this concept of a utopia, and it never is. And again, learn from the Bradford colony on our own continent, not Mao and Stalin and Marx and Lenin, and even more recently, Chavez and now Maduro in Venezuela. It fails every time, and it is because, as Jesus said about human nature, there will always be some, rather than bother to make things of themselves, will just try to steal from others to get by. And that's why communism always fails. Human nature. Communism can work just fine in heaven, potentially, but it doesn't work here on earth. Okay? Honestly, truly, I'm done rambling because I'm now over 50 minutes, and you know I like to keep these shows short, so this show has gone much longer. Thank you so much to all of you that indeed hung out through all these ramblings. But I know if you did, you understand all these things relate. You can't look at one thing versus another in a vacuum. Thank you all. Take care. May God bless you.
Thank you for having tuned in for ChristiTutionalist Politics Show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold. If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you, or autographed copies are available online direct from me via terrorstrikes.info/shop. Be sure to check out more about today's discussion at thelibertybeacon.com, where my articles drop every Saturday. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come. But for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, no fancy high production intro or insert, at least yet, just straight to key discussion point. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless. Like and subscribe to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast and share episodes. We need your help to grow the show.
It is a myth that terrorism stopped during COVID. Unfortunately, mainstream media opted to prioritize pandemic hysteria over promoting all news. Terrorism continues. Simply hoping that it doesn't affect you is not a strategy. The new book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you, featured on The Author Show, is now available in paperback from bookstores, online, or as an ebook exclusively through Amazon Kindle. Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you by Joseph M. Leonard. Order today.